Greetings all. Recently I got hold of a Space Marine Heroes box, Games Workshop's version of a blind bag with a random Space Marine miniature inside. And I thought it would make for a good video to do a kit bash without knowing what my starting point will be, to a certain extent. Obviously I know it's going to be some kind of Space Marine. With the model being a firstborn, it does limit some of my options a little, however, as most of my Bix box is Primaris, so let's see how we go. Now, I had been hoping for one of the models in a less standard pose, as that would have made my life a lot easier. But I have here Brother Guyan, probably said that one wrong, who is pointing his bolter forward in a fairly standard way. We can work with this, however. First up, I got to take all those parts off the sprue with my clippers, and then clean them up of mould lines and sprue tabs with my knife. I have a habit of forgetting this step with parts, and it makes a massive difference to do it all when it's in pieces, compared to trying when the model is glued together, so I'm trying to be better. It's a process. Once this is done, I can start by gluing together the body and the power pack for this Marine, as that part is definitely not going to change. Which leaves me with a choice of 2 heads, the bolter and an arm. But aside from that left arm, I don't think I'll be using these parts, so I'll keep them aside in my bits box. I think I'm going to make a captain or maybe a lieutenant out of this fella. For his right arm, I decided I wanted to have a melee weapon, as the position of the shoulder would work for having a weapon raised to strike or just brandishing it in the air whilst running forwards in an inspiring manner. Something a Space Marine commander is wont to do in battle. For this, I'm going to be using this arm here from the Age of Sigmar Vindictors, with some adjustments to it. Now, I do have an arm from another Stormcast model that is holding a mace, which would be good for this, if only it wasn't quite so chunky. And as I have several of these banner arms, this will be perfect. And the first thing I'd do to this arm here would be to trim down the banner pole to just the wrapped handle bit, including the metal bands at the top and bottom of this section. And after that is done, I can take the arm off just above the elbow. I would normally use my saw for this, as it is fairly thick, but it appears to be hiding today, so knife it is. Once the arm is off, I can then test fit it to the shoulder of the Marine, and noted that I needed to trim down the bracer a little so that it could sit flush. Before I attach this arm to the body, I am going to need to finish his weapon, as no self-respecting Space Marine commander is going into battle armed with just a stick. For this, I'm going to use the hammer I mentioned earlier. Taking my clippers and knife, I could remove the head of the hammer and clean the cut area. I also took my hobby drill and made a small 1mm hole so that I can pin it to the handle. Using my drill again, I'm going to have to drill into the handle of the weapon, very carefully however, as this part is quite thin, and then a length of 1mm wire is superglued into place before being trimmed down so that it protrudes about the same length as the hole in the hammer is. This can then have more glue added before attaching the hammerhead in place on the handle. The hammer isn't quite finished yet though. I have here an ammo pouch thingy from the Tau Fire Warriors kit. Trimming the belt clip off the side and flattening out one side of it a little, I can then glue it in place on the rear of the hammer to both add a little bit of bulk to that side of the weapon and also give the impression of a power unit for it, and make it look a little bit less plain. And with that done, the arm can then be glued in place onto the body with some plastic glue. For his left arm, I'm planning to be using this little plasma pistol from the Dark Angels upgrade sprue, as I am rather short on firstborn weapons, and it's appropriately fancy for a commander. Before I can attach it though, I need to trim off the tab on the arm and clean the cut area so there's a nice flat join, and with a little plastic glue, the pistol hand can be added in place. And the arm can then be glued onto the body. At this point, I also attached him to his included base to make it a bit easier to handle. Now for his head, I'm not going to be using one of the ones from the kit, I'm instead going to be using this one here from the Stormcast Lord Imperatant, as I like that it has a more aged look than most Space Marine heads. And with the firstborn Marines being less than current in the setting of 40k right now, with the inclusion of Primaris, I thought that it would fit well, him being older looking physically. To fit this head, however, I would need to make a few adjustments to the neck, Not only does it have a push-fit tab on it, but it also has a bit of a strange shaped neck joint area, whereas the more traditional Space Marine heads have a ball joint. This can be easily done by using my clippers to clip away some of the excess plastic before coming in with my knife to tidy the area and round it off a little. And then I just removed all the mould lines from his hair before I forget that they exist. And once this is done, I could add it to the body in an appropriate position with some plastic glue. With the bulk of this marine done, I'm going to mix up some green stuff putty. Bit of yellow, bit of blue, mix them together, and then using a little on the join on his right arm, I can fill out the area a little, and also used a bit to attach a magnet to his base. Additionally, I put a little bit aside for later on, but I needed it to firm up a tiny bit before I could use it for what I'm planning. So whilst waiting for that, I'm going to take this Stormcast helmet, as I would like to use the crest on it to make an iron halo for this guy's backpack. Although first, I would need to use my knife to trim down the anvil on top of the crest whilst it's still attached to the head, as it might look out of place on a Space Marine, and it's a lot easier to do so when you've got more to grip. With my clippers and knife, I can then take the crest from the helmet and trim the ends of it flat. Although, comparing it to the backpack, I noted that I would still need to take a small notch out on either side so it could sit nicely on the pack. Once the new iron halo is glued in place, my green stuff has had a little bit more time to firm up. I could then move on to decorating his shoulder. I want to drape some decorative rope over it to give it a little more visual interest. To do this, I will need to roll out some very, very thin sausages of green stuff and then twist them together. But first, I made sure to put some Vaseline down so that it did not stick to the table. Once I had a nice long thin sausage, I could fold it in half and then gently twist it together to form some very tight coils that I can pass off as rope. This can then be carefully draped over the shoulder, pressing it in place on the ends with my tools. I did 2 drapes of rope here and a small one dangling down the front. I also gently pushed them with my tools just to help stick them to the shoulder pad in the middle. Now, the ends of the rope here do seem a little bare, and it didn't look too great. To rectify this, I took some small balls of green stuff and placed one on either end. This could then be squished in the middle with my barbecue skewer to form something akin to a Purity Seal wax, which would cover the ends of the rope and add yet more details to this fairly plain area. And with that, he is done. I painted him up as an Ultramarine, as I haven't done one of those guys yet, and they are the poster boys for 40k, so I figured why not. I hope you enjoyed this one. The randomness of the starting kit was actually quite enjoyable for me, and a nice change to be spontaneous instead of planning everything out. If you enjoyed this video, then consider subscribing if you aren't already. Comments and likes are also welcome, as they all help the channel grow, and a massive thanks to all those who are already subbed. You guys are awesome. Stay safe and have a good one all.